What's up, guys? This is Nick Benson. You can follow me on Twitter at PackerNation2K. Just coming back at you with a new episode of the Pack Nation podcast. It's been a while since I've done a podcast, but just wanted to get back in the groove of things. And typically on my podcasts, I'll talk about the previous week's game and then the upcoming game. But I might talk about that a little bit in this episode. But there was a clear topic I wanted to talk about today, and that was Brian Gutekunst and his success as Packers general manager. And, it's something that has been talked about a little bit amongst Packers fans and what you'll see online and on social media, but I don't think it's been talked about enough. And ultimately, I feel like Brian Gutekunst has gotten a little more flack than he deserves, especially in the past year. And I don't know, I think that some people have just this mindset that he's not doing a great job or that he doesn't surround Aaron Rodgers with enough talent. And I think that might have partially to do with the fact that Ted Thompson, when he was general manager of the Packers, more towards the tail end of his tenure as the Packers general manager, was not necessarily supplying Aaron Rodgers with the best talent and the best overall rosters to go win a Super Bowl. A lot of those late Ted Thompson tenure teams, I'm talking, 2016 and then 2017, something like that. They just were mostly Aaron Rodgers, his receivers, and then no defense, not a great running game always, and then a lot of just an injury-prone roster, and not very well coached there at the end by Mike McCarthy. So, I don't think that a lot of people understand that Brian Gutekunst has really changed this organization since he's taken over as GM in 2018. That being said, looking at his whole tenure since 2018, that was Mike McCarthy's last year as head coach, and the Packers went through a rough year at 6-9-1, but he started his roster changing that year, and it all started with his first draft pick of taking Jair Alexander, the cornerback in that first round, and he's turned into an all-pro and was a Pro Bowl starter last year, and unfortunately has been dealing with an injury this year, but he's a lockdown corner. And I mean, those are rare and hard to find in this league, and anytime you can start out your tenure as general manager with a draft pick like that, that's an awesome note to start on. And what was great in that draft also was the fact that he traded down a few spots as they had a late first round pick, and then were able to they trade out of the first round, and then they trade back into the first round. So essentially, they went down and got a fourth round pick, and then just traded a fourth round pick to the Saints to move back into the first round, and then get Jair Alexander and get a first round pick for the next year, which they used to take Darnell Savage, which I don't know, was great draft strategy, great draft tactics by Brian Gutekunst right off the bat. And I mean, I thought it was amazing that day. And elsewhere in that draft, that wasn't necessarily the best draft overall, but he did also nab Marquez Valdes-Scantling in the fifth round, who's been a great worthwhile pick in the fifth round, and has exceeded expectations, I think, as a fifth round pick. He's been the league leader in yards per catch the past few years, was second in the Packers in receiving in 2020 with over 600 yards and a handful of touchdowns. Was about the only player who came to play on offense or who had a really good game in the NFC Championship game against Tampa Bay last year. And this year is having a solid year despite some injuries. Had a great game against Baltimore a few weeks ago. And he's just added an element to this offense that's really needed in the league, which is that deep threat that you have to keep mind of. And yeah, he's had a few drops here and there, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling has been a great draft pick, and something that Brian Gutekunst can hang his hat on there in drafting a good receiver there. In that draft, he also took Equanimeous St. Brown in the 6th round, and first 6th-round pick, I think he's been worthwhile as well. Made a few plays his rookie year, but when the Packers have needed him, he's generally stepped up and made some plays, and he's been a good special teams guy as well. So first 6th-round pick to have stuck around that long and to make some impact has been a good pick there. A few duds in that draft, including Josh Jackson, the 2nd-round pick out of Iowa, which, at the time you can't really fault Gutekunst for it. A lot of people thought that Jackson was a surefire 1st-round pick, but then he fell into the 2nd round. And remember at the time we thought that, Jair and Josh Jackson was just, a great first 2 picks for the Packers. And the fact they got what many people thought were the 2 best corners in that draft, or 2 of the best 3 maybe, was awesome. But ultimately that didn't turn out. Still a worthwhile gamble on Josh Jackson. And the fact that Jair panned out, makes up for it, in my opinion. In that offseason in free agency, he goes out and he picks up Jimmy Graham, which didn't really end up working out too well, unfortunately. But he picked up Mercedes Lewis as a free agent. A guy that a lot of people weren't sure how many years he had left, and he looked like he might be on his way out of the league, but one thing that he was still doing well at that point when the Packers picked him up was he was a great blocker, and he's been nothing short of that for the Packers. It's almost like having a 6 offensive lineman out there, another tackle to help there in the running game and in pass protection. Gotta love what Mercedes Lewis has brought to the table for the Packers. He's also, he's not very fast, and we know that, but he's got great moves after the catch, and he's just a big, strong target with great hands, and he's been a good red zone threat. He's been sneaky good in the pass game, and he's just been so well respected by the Packers locker room as well. So that was a worthwhile signing for Brian Gutekunst, and the fact that he's in his 4th year with the Packers, which a lot of people thought that was just a 1-year deal for him before he retired. That's just been great for the Packers to have a guy like that and a role model in the locker room like Big Dog, Mercedes Lewis. And then he also brought in Tramon Williams that offseason, and he had a couple of good years there for the Packers in 18 and 19, playing corner for them. The Packers had a pretty good defense in 2019, and he was a big part of that, and was great to see them bring him back after he had left the team for a few years to play in Cleveland and Arizona. And then, he was a great mentor in that locker room, and that was a great signing. So, he made a few good free agent signings that offseason, and one that kind of people, I guess, sweep under the rug or that they don't remember is the fact that Allen Lazard was an undrafted free agent that year out of Iowa State, and he started with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and was just on their practice squad that whole year. And then late in the year, Brian Gutekunst, snatches him up off that practice squad. And if you're familiar with Iowa State or familiar with you watch college football closely, you knew who Allen Lazard was, but many people did not know who he was, and a lot of people just didn't think much of that signing. But then he comes into 2019, he balls out, has a great training camp, and ultimately was cut in the final roster cuts to his disappointment. But the team brought him back a few days later. He's on the roster, and then wasn't getting used much, and it wasn't active a lot, but then they had him active, playing mostly special teams. And then, about week, 5 or 6 comes around, and a game against Detroit, Packers are struggling the whole game, and, Aaron Rodgers calls Allen Lazard on the field. He tells the coaches to bring him out there because they were struggling and receivers were having a hard time separating, all the guys that Rodgers wasn't trusting. And Lazard comes in and he makes a big touchdown catch along the sideline, makes a few other big plays, and the rest is history. Since then, he's been an integral part of the Packers offense. Just a great guy that does all the dirty work, probably the best blocking wide receiver in the NFL, but he's also just a big physical guy with great hands, a guy you can rely on to move the chains and can go deep if need be. Well respected by his teammates, a guy Aaron Rodgers trusts, and you see him lately in these past few games just making plays and looking like a true number 2 receiver. It'll be interesting, in the playoffs, the way they use him, because with the way teams keying on Devontae Adams, it's good to have role guys like Allen Lazard who can step up for you when need be. So, that was a great, just diamond in the rough signing by Brian Gutekunst, and shouldn't go unnoticed there in 2018. And then you look at 2019, and that year was the year that Brian Gutekunst really laid the foundation with a great just haul of big name free agent signings, spent a lot of money, but they have panned out. He goes and gets the Smith bros, Za'Darius and Preston Smith, and they've just been nothing short of phenomenal for the Packers. They were 2 guys who they weren't Pro Bowl or All Pro players, but they had shown potential. Preston Smith had a couple 8-sack seasons in his first 4 years in Washington, and Za'Darius Smith was coming off of a career year with 8 sacks with Baltimore in 2018. And, Brian Gutekunst saw the upside, liked the upside, and he gives them both big money contracts. And they come in 2019 and just form an outstanding duo, combined for, I think, like 25 sacks that year. And we're just, game wreckers out there. They turned the team around after that poor year in 2018 to come back to go 13-3 in Matt Lafleur's first year as head coach in 2019. And, Preston is just, after a down year in 2020, has come back this year, has 9 sacks with 1 game to go, and he's just been a great pass rusher, and he's been great against the run, just a resurgent year for him. And, Za'Darius, 13 sacks in 2019, and then comes back with 13 in 2020. Second team All-Pro, Pro Bowl starter, just been a beast out there, and unfortunately he's been missed this year. But, if they could potentially get him back for the playoffs, that would be great for their depth there. And, just knocking out of the park there by Brian Gutekunst with those signings. And then, he goes out and he gets Adrian Amos that offseason. And, safety had been a position that was just, the cupboard was bare there before that offseason. Clinton Dix panned out after a promising start to his career. Morgan Burnett was gone, and they needed a stable force back there. And Adrian Amos was the perfect guy for that. Not the flashiest player ever, but man, Adrian Amos is just solid as can be back there. You can always rely on him to be in the right position. He's a leader back there. He's smart. He's a sure tackler. He likes to hit hard. He can force fumbles. He can go make plays back there, and just been a stable force back there. And it's made a huge difference in the Packers' pass defense since they signed him. And then they also signed Billy Turner that offseason. He's just been a super reliable offensive lineman for the Packers. Started all 16 games at right guard in 2019. Then they moved him to right tackle in 2020 with Brian Balaga's departure. And Billy Turner goes out and just, since then has played at arguably a Pro Bowl level at right tackle. He struggles at times. He's injured right now, but, he's just been a solid signing there, and he's just been a great locker room guy as well. So that was a big deal, was the offensive line was a concern going into that offseason, and they fixed it, with him. And then what was great about that offseason as well was they had 3 clear targets of need, which were offensive line, edge rusher, and outside linebacker, and safety. And then you look at their draft picks on top of those free agent signings I just mentioned, and they go and they draft Rashawn Gary, the outside linebacker out of Michigan, in the first round, to add to Za'Darius and Preston Smith. With their second first-round pick, they had gotten from the Saints the year before. They go out and get Darnell Savage, the safety out of Maryland. And then with the second-round pick, they go out and get Elton Jenkins, the every position offensive lineman out of Mississippi State. And, talk about targeting positions. They hit it on the head at all of those positions, and all of them panned out. You look at Rashawn Gary, and, he had a kind of a slow start to his career, but he's slowly emerged since then, and, comes up with about 5 sacks in 2020, but he was showing steady progress late in the year and, especially late in games. And now in 2021, in a starting role with Zadarius Smith out, leads the team with 9.5 sacks with 1 game to go. And it's just been a menace out there. He's a guy who just plays hard, plays to the final whistle. And, that draft pick had some people, some experts or so-called experts, thinking that was a poor pick, that Rashawn Gary wasn't that productive in college, but he's been nothing but productive in the, lately in the NFL. It took him to his 3rd year, but that was a worthwhile pick. He had all the athletic upside and tools, and he's shown it. So, great pick there with Rashawn Gary and a great future for him. Bright future. Darnell Savage has been solid back there since he came in 2019. He made the all-rookie team as he had a couple picks and a couple forced fumbles, I believe. And then 2020 leads the team with 4 interceptions. This year, 2021 has a couple picks. Now, Darnell Savage, I wouldn't say he's a perfect player, especially lately his past few games. He's been a little suspect in coverage, but ultimately he's a guy who plays fast. He plays hard. He's a ball hawk. He hits hard. He's a playmaker, and he's generally pretty reliable back there in coverage. He and Adrian Amos have created a pretty solid duo back there at safety, and he also has a bright future as well. I could see some Pro Bowls in his career coming up if he can just be a little more consistent. Elton Jenkins, obviously, has just been a masterful pick by Brian Gutekunst in the 2nd round. Very rare guy who can play any position on the offensive line. He had been starting at guard for the team and was an all-rookie in 2019, but in 2020, he had to play multiple positions due to injury, and then is voted a Pro Bowl starter. And then this year in 2021 was David Bakhtiari's replacement at left tackle, with him, still recovering from that torn ACL, and he was doing a great job playing at a Pro Bowl level before he unfortunately tore his ACL in November. But make no mistake, that was just a great pick there by Gutekunst, and once again encapsulated that offseason, hit it really hard on the offensive line and edge and safety, and all 3 of those positions were greatly improved the next year, and it led to the Packers going 13-3 in 2019, and now having 3 consecutive 13-3 seasons for the first team in NFL history to do that. So that is great. And ultimately that offseason, Gutekunst hires Matt Lafleur, a guy who wasn't a huge name in the NFL, was the offensive coordinator for the Titans in 2018, and that they were one of the lowest ranked offenses in the league. But, Gutekunst and Mark Murphy liked Matt Lafleur, and not just liked him, they loved him. They loved his interview. They loved what he was about, and he's proven to just be a godsend there. This team needed a change in culture after the Mike McCarthy era had grown stale, and he's a great coach. His players love him. He's a great locker room, coach, and he cares about winning. He cares about his players, and he's just a great offensive mind. So, props to Gutekunst for the hiring of Matt Lafleur. And then you go on to 2020. There was a few decent signings that year, nothing too notable though to speak of, but in the draft, he gets a lot of flack for drafting Jordan Love, and we'll see, how that ends up panning out, but ultimately it motivated Aaron Rodgers to have his best, maybe the best season of his career in 2020. Maybe not passer rating wise, but he was still outstanding, and broke the Packers franchise record, his own record for most touchdown passes in a single season that year with 48, and he won his 3rd MVP, his first MVP since 2014. Now in 2021, he's likely to win his 4th MVP, even though we'll see if that happens. But that Love pick though, I don't mind the fact that he saw a guy that the Packers liked, and what they always say is the worst time to get a quarterback is when you need one. And the Packers clearly didn't have a need there, but Aaron Rodgers wasn't young at the time, and they found a guy they liked there late in the 1st round, and they took him. And what better situation for him than to sit behind Aaron Rodgers and I mean, we'll see if he's the quarterback of the future for the Packers. He's, I wouldn't say he was wowed anyone yet in his time in the league, but, in that one start he had this year against the Chiefs, he didn't wow anyone, but, he hung in there, and I like the fact that he led a touchdown drive at the end of the game and didn't let all that pressure get to him, that he was taking the whole game, and, it was great to see him get a start, and we'll likely see more of him this weekend against Detroit, which is great. So gotta love the fact that, Jordan Love is there, and, if Aaron Rodgers is going to be there long term, then Jordan Love is a guy you can trade, and you're probably not going to get a first round pick out of him right now, but you could still get a solid pick because there's a lot of QB needing teams in the league. So that's with the Jordan Love pick, and then, they get they have another criticized pick in the second round in 2020, taking A.J. Dillon, the running back out of Boston College. And, a lot of people are like, oh, why would you take a running back there? And, oh, you have Aaron Jones and you have Jamal Williams, two really good backs. But, the Packers knew that Jones and Williams would be going into free agency the next offseason. And, Williams ended up leaving. A.J. Dillon wasn't used a ton as a rookie, but late in the year he showed what he could do. I think about that Titans win on Sunday Night Football when he rushed for about 130 yards and a couple touchdowns in the snow. It just looked like a perfect Green Bay cold weather back. I mean, he's a bruiser, the most bruising back and the Packers had since Eddie Lacy. And he's ultimately formed a great duo with Aaron Jones there, a perfect thunder lightning duo. And you see the way that they've been using him lately. He's just been getting yards in chunks, getting a lot of first downs, and he's been underrated in the fact that he's been a great catcher of the football. A lot of people thought coming out of college that he wasn't a great receiver, but he's proven to be that. And, he's made a huge impact on this team. And honestly, a late second round pick, you can argue, oh, there were bigger positions of need, but I don't know if I can think of another guy right now that would be making more of an impact on this team than what A.J. Dillon's doing right now. So, it looks like Brian Gutekunst nailed that draft pick that year. He also takes Josiah DeGuara that year out of Cincinnati, and that, he's come on a little bit lately, and, tight ends take time. He's kind of had to take over the void left when Robert Tonyan tore his ACL this year and was out the rest of the year. But I like the way they've been using him in this offense, and he's one of those guys that Matt Lafleur just loved and wanted to get creative with, kind of like in a Kyle Juszczyk role, the way the 49ers use him and Kyle Shanahan. So I like the future for DeGuara. He needs to stay healthy. He's had a few issues with injuries in his career, but I think the future is bright for him. In that draft, they also go out and get John Runyon Jr., an offensive lineman out of Michigan, and he's been pretty great, I think, for the Packers. His rookie year in 2020 comes in, just has a handful of appearances, but looked good in those coming off the bench due to injury. And then this year, he started pretty much every game, I think, at left guard, and I believe that he's been probably the most consistent Packers offensive lineman this year, just with his play. So knocking out of the park there for a 6th round pick. Can't ask for much more than that. And the Packers have a few other guys there. John Garvin, the 7th round pick out of Miami. He's been a little up and down, was better earlier in the year than he has been lately, but for a 7th round pick, I think they're definitely pleased in what they've seen out of him. And I think an overall solid draft that year. And, going into 2021, what he did in the draft and in free agency, he's made some key moves, I thought, even though they were under the radar and the Packers didn't have, I guess, a lot of money to spend. They go out in June and they pick up Devondre Campbell for a 1-year, $2 million deal. So usually guys like that are players that teams don't necessarily want that badly, and obviously he didn't get a long-term deal. But, Devondre Campbell was a guy I personally always liked when he played for Atlanta, and then the 1 year he played for Arizona in 2020. Just a big, physical, rangy linebacker, reliable to stay healthy, and, he's given the Packers a presence there at inside linebacker they haven't had, I don't think, since maybe Desmond Bishop during their Super Bowl run in 2010. He's been just great there at inside linebacker and has really helped their run defense and overall defense this year. So, he's been probably the best bargain of free agency this year. If you ask me, but if he's not, then I think the best bargain has been Rasul Douglas. You know him, the name by now. All Packers fans know. They didn't know him before, but you do now. He's been nothing short of phenomenal this year. When Jair Alexander went down earlier this season, I was a little worried about the Packers' cornerback room. I liked Eric Stokes, but he was just a rookie, and I didn't know what they had beyond that. Kevin King hadn't been reliable to stay healthy, and his play had been inconsistent. So, they bring in Rasul Douglas, sign him off the Arizona Cardinals practice squad after he bounced around I think he was with 4 different teams in 2021. I think he was with the Panthers for a little bit, the Raiders for a little bit, Texans, and then Cardinals, of course. And they signed him off the practice squad in October, and the rest is history. He comes in and just brings a physical, competitive presence out there. He's just got great ball skills. He's got great anticipation on routes. Has 5 interceptions, including 2 returned back for touchdowns and 2 game-sealing interceptions this year. Who knows where the Packers would be this year without him. And the fact they plucked him off a practice squad, and are paying him next to nothing is just crazy to me. So, if Gutekunst doesn't sign Devondre Campbell, doesn't sign Rasul Douglas, this defense would not be that great, I don't think. And who knows where the Packers would be. I definitely don't think they would be, 13-3 for the 3rd consecutive year and then having the number 1 seed. So, great moves by Brian Gutekunst this past offseason. Also, he signs Dennis Kelly, the former Tennessee Titan and Philadelphia Eagle offensive lineman. Signs him in July, and a lot of people thought he could maybe compete for a starting job. Doesn't get it, deals with injuries, and the team ultimately started some other guys over him, including Josh Nijman, who I should mention. I'll go back to Dennis Kelly, but Josh Nijman is another Brian Gutekunst gem. Picks him up as an undrafted free agent out of Virginia Tech in 2019, and he just was a guy a lot of people thought, okay, just a developmental guy, big, athletic dude, but don't know anything about him. And then, with injury, just David Bakhtiari not playing all year, and then, Elton Jenkins getting hurt early in the year, they needed Josh Nijman, and I thought, they would maybe put Dennis Kelly in over him, but no, they put Josh Nijman, and what can you say about him? I think he started 8 games this year, and he's been super consistent there at left tackle. Maybe had a few slip-ups in a game or 2, but that's to be expected for a player playing in his first experience at all in the NFL. And where would the Packers offense be without Josh Nijman? The 3rd string offensive tackle guy no one knew about unless you're a hardcore Packers fan. And even me as a hardcore Packers fan, I didn't know much about Josh, and I didn't even know if he was going to make the team this year, but I'm glad he did. I'm glad Brian Gutekunst picked him up in 2019 and has kept him around, has developed him, and he's just been great there for the team. And back to Dennis Kelly, though, Billy Turner gets hurt a few weeks ago against the Bears, and now he's had to start. Dennis Kelly's had to start the last 3 games, I believe, and, the team hasn't missed a beat there. He's been great at right tackle, and a guy that started about every game last year for the Tennessee Titans at right tackle. And why he was available in July, why teams didn't want him, I don't know, but clearly teams didn't want him, and he's been great. So got to be happy with him and what he's given this offensive line, and then looking at the draft this year, he goes and takes Eric Stokes out of Georgia in the 1st round, the cornerback. That was a pick that was criticized a little bit. A lot of people thought that he was really raw and wasn't going to be ready right away, but they were definitely wrong on that. Not to say he's perfect. He's had a few rookie moments, including the game at Minnesota when Justin Jefferson cooked him, basically. But, Justin Jefferson is great. I'll say that as a Packers fan. I do respect Justin Jefferson in his game. So, Yeah, Eric Stokes, though, I mean, that dude is an athletic freak, one of the fastest guys in the league. And I mean, he's just been great out there. Pretty locked down in coverage most of the time against some great receivers as well. And, he has been ready to play, and that guy has a really bright future. I think he can be one of the best cornerbacks in this league, especially if he can just improve on his ball skills a little bit. Did make one big interception this year with a game sealer against Pittsburgh in week 4, so that's been a great pick so far. He picked Josh Myers, the center of Ohio State, in the second round, and he, I don't know, like he had a great start. He won the center job outright, but then he, has had that injury since week 5, so we'll see where that goes. It is, and keep in mind, it is early to judge a lot of draft picks, especially rookies, but he could come back soon. He has started practicing, so got to be excited about Josh Myers. He takes Royce Newman, the guard of Ole Miss, in the 4th round. He started every game at right guard for the team. He's had his rookie moments, but is really settling into that spot and looks like a steal there in the 4th round. So, a couple great picks, I feel like, so far. And Stokes and Newman. The rest of it we'll see. We'll see if like Amari Rodgers pans out, among others. I thought Kylan Hill was a great pick in the 7th round. Balled out all preseason, was playing really well in the kick return game before unfortunately tearing his ACL earlier this year. I think he has a bright future and could be a steal there in the 7th round. So ultimately, good draft for the Packers. And thinking about all these guys, another guy I guess I haven't mentioned so far, is Chris Barnes, getting him as an undrafted free agent in 2020 out of UCLA. He's come in and has been an inside linebacker since day one, and hasn't been perfect, but still has been pretty solid there, I would say, and has had some great games. And for an undrafted free agent signing, he's been, great. So forming with Campbell, a pretty solid duo there at inside linebacker for the Packers. This offseason, he also brought in Corey Bojorquez, the punter, and that was a big upgrade over J.K. Scott, who was a draft pick of his, which maybe not his best draft pick in 2018. 2018 was pretty rough outside of Jair Alexander and MVS and maybe EQ, but, he's been great for the Packers this year, despite the fact that he did have a pretty bad shank punt against the Vikings, but I think he'll get that figured out, and he's just booming kick. We haven't seen a punter like him in a long time. I don't remember seeing a punter like him in my Packers fandom. So ultimately, I don't know, like this team, if you look at it overall, Brian Gutekunst is built around Aaron Rodgers. A great duo at running back, perfect thunder lightning combination. He didn't draft Devontae Adams, but he's drafted great role players outside of him at wide receiver, and Allen Lazard and Marco Valdes-Scantling. At tight end, he brought in Mercedes Lewis, who's been just an outstanding mentor, great blocker. Josiah DeGuara's got great upside there. Even Dominic Daphne has shown a little bit as an H-back type. He's been great there on the offensive line. They are just so deep. He didn't draft David Bakhtiari, but he's brought in, so many good guys there. Billy Turner, John Runyon Jr., Dennis Kelly, Royce Newman, Josh Myers, Yosh Nijman. He's just created great depth there, so got to give him credit for that. Defensive line, maybe not the most. He did bring in Kingsley Keke, who's been a good interior guy, has gotten some pass rush there. Brian Lancaster's an undrafted free agent, which is a nice undrafted free agent guy, rotational run defender, but TJ Slayton's got some upside too, his rookie 5th round pick out of Florida, but he's brought in some guys. They had Kenny Clark and Dean Lowry, and they brought in a few guys there behind them. At outside linebacker, the Smith Bros, Adarius and Preston, and then Rashawn Gary. That's just been great. He's just been done awesome there, what he did there in 2019. Inside linebacker, Devondre Campbell, Chris Barnes, solid duo. Oren Burks, even though he's probably been a bust as a 3rd round pick in 2018, has been a nice 3rd guy this year with his speed, and has been a good special teams player his whole career. You look at cornerback, Jair Alexander, amazing. Eric Stokes, amazing as a rookie. Russell Douglas coming out of nowhere, been great. He brought in Shannon Sullivan off the streets in 2019, and he's been a pretty decent nickel cornerback for the team. They're in the slot. So, I mean, he's done great there. At safety, he brought in Amos and Savage, an outstanding duo. And on special teams, he brings in Corey Bojorquez. So, ultimately, you have to be pleased with the job he's done. I feel like he's given him a great team, given Aaron Rodgers a great team. And I think that Matt Lafleur was a great, obviously, head coaching hire. So, I feel like Brian Gutekunst should win GM of the Year. He should have every award, any prestige coming his way. I feel like we should be talking about him more, and especially considering the flack he got with the Aaron Rodgers situation. Now they seem to be getting along better, so you have to be happy about that. And it's great times being a Packers fan right now. I can't wait to see what Brian Gutekunst does the rest of his year. Hopefully the Packers can finish off this outstanding 2021 year with a Super Bowl victory. A lot to be said before then, though, and I'm just happy that we have Brian Gutekunst as our general manager. So thank you for keeping up with this, guys. I know I talked a lot for over half an hour, but I had a lot to say, and I hope you liked the podcast. Once again, you can follow me on Twitter at PackerNation2K. Thanks again, guys, and go Pack, go.